I'm Deanna. I am the Executive Director of the Luxury Resale Association. And today Wesley Smith will be joining us, probably right on time because I didn't remind him to join earlier. But Wesley, I recently met and I love what he's doing. Not so much luxury resale, but he started a clothing and what I would call a lifestyle brand, StandardH. And anybody who starts a clothing brand like fascinates me. Just how do they do it? How do they go from an idea to actually launching it? Because I think those are really good business ideas that anybody can implement in their own business. It's just fascinating to me. Secretly, I've always wanted to, but I don't have the passion nor the skill nor really the desire, but it's one of those ideas that always floats in my head. And then he is a luxury watch collector, pre-owned, which I'm also fascinated with, but I don't have the capacity in my brain to learn everything there is to know about watches. But that's such a big category that is growing really fast in the pre-owned market. So we're going to talk to him about that. Yeah, we'll get started in a minute when he joins. We're going to use the Q&A this time. So if you have any questions for Wesley or myself or anything at all, post them in the Q&A, which you can find at the bottom of your little Zoom screen here, and ask away. So yeah, that's it. Hopefully you guys are getting our emails. Please check your spam folders. We sent one out yesterday and a bunch ended up in spam. So if you didn't get it, it would have been the invite to today's webinar. And then we're also hosting another one tomorrow with Tammy Fan, CEO and founder of Lux du Jour Resale, which will be fun, but also to let you know that we have done away with the discount codes for membership. Don't panic, but it's a pain in the ass. Like, I don't ever remember codes, and if I don't remember it, then I'm not going to get the discount. So we've just gotten rid of all of them.
Hi.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm good. I forgot to remind you to jump on a couple minutes earlier, but you're fine. I've been rambling, so it's all good. So I'm so excited to have you here today because we talked just about a week ago, and then my brain has just been like going back and forth. Like, I went over your website, I Googled you, I Googled the business, StandardH, and then looking at everything that you built there, and then throwing in the luxury watch. It's all fascinating to me. Anybody who can build a brand, which I'm gonna stop talking in a second, let you introduce yourself. But I'm super curious because, like I just said a second ago, of all the ideas that I have, like, I would love to start a clothing line. I don't have the passion nor the skill, nor like I'm not cool enough to do that. But when somebody does and they're successful with it, it just like I'm in awe. So I'm going to turn it over to you. And please tell your story, how you started StandardH, because I want to start with that and then we'll jump into the watches.
Sure. Well, without giving me too much credit, I appreciate the kind words. It's been a long time coming. It's something I've wanted to do since high school. Really, I worked in retail in high school and college, and I recently shared on one of my own sort of podcast episodes about how I actually met with a career counselor when I was 29, and I was just feeling lost at the time. I'm much older than 29 now, but basically he said to me, like, what would you do if you had $1 gazillion? And it was just kind of like, well, I've always wanted to start my own apparel brand. He goes, well, then why don't you do that? And so I was like, well, I'm broke, first of all. So there was that. But really, it was a function of doing whatever you can with what you have. And for me, at the time when I was 35, was I don't know why it took me 6 years to finally take the leap. These things are scary. They're exciting. They're nerve-wracking. And like, how do you do it? And finally, when I was 35, I basically just said, look, I'm going to start with a hat. And it was this designed hat. And I had a few $100 that I could like make some patches and buy some hats. And then so I sold some, like just a few hats, like a dozen or 2 dozen. And then with that money, made more, sold more, made more, sold more. And that started with a hat. Then I got into screen printed t-shirts. And then this is all while I was working retail still. I worked for James Purse out of Los Angeles, as we touched on a week ago.
Yeah.
And then at the time of me launching my first hat, I was actually one of the managers at the Gucci boutique here in San Diego. So it was very much that side hustle, very much like Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week, reading books and, from 0 to 1, those kinds of books. And yeah, I mean, that's just kind of how it all started. I opened up the store here in San Diego for a shoe company called Allen Edmonds. If you haven't heard of it, I'm sure your father has, because it's more of like a leather dress shoe, very popular within like the law community. Like a lot of lawyers wear those shoes with their suits and such, real estate agents, things of that nature. But they have a long storied history, but they were opening up a new boutique here in San Diego, kind of plucked me to do that, hire everybody, set up the store. And then when the pandemic happened, I got furloughed, of course, and kind of used a lot of my money for product development to do what I'm sort of would categorize it as doing now in its current iteration, which is full cut and sew, my own fabric, my own silhouettes, details, all that made in Los Angeles.
Wow, that's so amazing. I have a question for you. So
Please.
I know that I've done a lot of things or wanted to do a lot of things, and fear is basically what stops people.
Yeah.
Now, this is a two-part question. When you were working retail, did you look at it as I can do this better, or I'm not finding what I'm looking for? And then from there, you said there was a 6-year gap. What was the catalyst that you were like, all right, I'm done. I'm starting this?
I think to answer the first part of your question, it was kind of twofold, really. One, a major component was like, I just want to work for myself. Like, I would always come to my bosses with new ideas and ways to either market or products we could develop. Without, again, I'm not going to take credit for more than I deserve, for sure. But there was a line within James Purse called Yosemite, and they still have it. And it's sort of the outdoor activewear extension of James Purse.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was there at its inception, and I created not a business plan, but like definitely like a PowerPoint presentation of like an inspiration images and sort of like a mood board, but within
Yeah.
PowerPoint, products I thought that we could make, design tweaks to those products that I would have tweaked. And I was just very like, I don't know. I've always been sort of entrepreneurial in that way, in that I've always been a product person, I guess, first and foremost. Like I love product. And it wasn't that I could do this better. It was just, how could I make this my own thing? Like, how could I stand out? How could I create something that's as equally nice, if not nicer?
Yeah.
I mean, James Purse is a high bar, right? So, I mean, that stuff's nice.
Yeah,
So,
they're one of my favorite t-shirts.
yeah, totally. So I like things, I just wanted to be a little different. Like one thing about James Purse, as you may know, not that this needs to be a James Purse advertisement, but it's like their stuff is really thin, which is kind of their marketable trait, is that they're
Yeah.
super soft and really thin and flowy. Well, I actually prefer a thicker t-shirt myself. So that was part of the reason. It's not that I could do it better. It was just, I want to do it differently.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of the first part. And forgive me, what was the second part? Oh, the fear and the 6-year gap.
Yeah. Like, what was the
Um,
catalyst that made you just do it?
Honestly, I think it was almost just kind of like a ticking clock in a way. Like I was like, good God, it's been 6 years since I met with David. Like, I need to do this. And if I fail, I fail. And if I can't do it, great, like whatever. And I think the fear that most people have, and this is like not to go into like a psychiatry, type of
No, it's all good. It's all
thing,
good.
like the ego gets in your way and feeling embarrassed and oh my God, but I can't fail. And it's like, no, that's actually when you learn, you know what I mean? Like you don't
Yeah.
learn by winning all the time. You learn how to get better by failing. And so finally I was just kind of like, look, I'm like on the wrong side of 40 now. And it's like, I have to do this or else I will never do it. And at the time I was single. So it's like I don't have a family to take care of at the time. I don't have a wife that I need to compromise with at all. Like I was
Yeah.
single and working and making money that was certainly sustaining a very fun lifestyle. But I wasn't a gazillionaire, of course, but that's why I started the way I started and then just kind of reinvest because I had my daytime jobs paycheck to support my life, right? Um, so the fear and the delay was more just like I thought I needed $1 million to start the company. I thought I needed $250,000 to start the company. And I
Yeah.
was just so sort of paralyzed by this like monetary implication that you need this to start that. And unfortunately, we were, also in this sort of cyclone of like venture cap, like being announced for all these brands and all these like online only exclusive brands being digitally native. And oh my God, these partners in Silicon Valley just invested a 1.2 billion or 4 million. And it was just so overwhelming for me. And then
Yeah.
I was, of course, like, as I mentioned, sort of in tune to Tim Ferriss, who was very much a Silicon Valley guy, right? Like
Yeah. No, I know who he is.
yeah, he
Yeah.
was in those sort of circles, and I wasn't, and still not. So it's kind of one of those things where, um, yeah, it was just sort of I was getting in my own way, I guess is the best way of saying it, as we
Yeah.
all do.
I think that's the problem. And like I talk to a lot of people all the time and they're like, I don't know where to start. And my advice is always take that first step. Like, don't like I get very singular focused. I don't care what everybody else is doing. Do I know what everyone else is doing? Absolutely. I'm like the best stalker ever. But I have a vision, and whether like I sometimes think that I have just absolute blind faith in myself. Like
Mm.
I don't if it's not there, I'm going to create it. If I want it, I create it. And I know people feel the same way, but they do that fear blocks them. And then it's the money. Like, how am I going to live? How am I going to do it? But it's just literally taking that one step. And for you, it was the hat. And then that road opens up, and I think people forget that, and especially if it's something that is your passion, like, this was from high school, your
Right.
passion. You wanted to do this. The universe will find a way to make it happen for you. It really will. If it's like a burning desire in you.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the thing, not and to be somewhat stoic about the conversation as well, like not everybody is an entrepreneur. Not everybody can, I don't know, be an administrative assistant. Like some people are just like really good at what they do and are happy doing it. And that is all good because we need those people to be that way as well. Like we can't force everyone to be an entrepreneur, obviously, because I mean, unless there's just a lot of like, single member LLCs everywhere. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, well, I mean, but that's just it. Like, there is absolutely nothing wrong with working a job for that paycheck of the insurance and the benefits. There's none.
100%.
It is also 100% okay to keep your side hustle as a side hustle, because I think a
Totally.
lot of people, they feel like, oh, well, I'm, working my side hustle and eventually I need to quit my job and just this be like take the road to becoming an entrepreneur. You don't have to do that. The only
Right.
person that you have to like make good is yourself and the people that closely surround you. Like you said, you weren't married, you didn't have kids, you didn't have any responsibilities. When you don't, you can play fast and loose. You can try all these different things
Right.
because no one really depending on you, but it does change with that. And Side hustles are great. There's a reason why they're called side hustles, you
Right.
know. So how long did it take you when you first launched hats to, were you like a full brand then? Was it Standard H? Did you have a website, or was this something you were just kind of selling on the side? Because I'm interested in your journey from that, because when you go to your website right now, and that's why I kind of look at it as a lifestyle brand, because you have amazing clothing and things like that. But I was also looking where like great coffee places are that
Oh,
you
right. Yeah.
so much on there. Like
Yeah.
it's an event to go to your website. You don't just go to shop, you go to learn and have an experience. And I love that when companies do that.
Well, that's really kind of you to say. Thank you. Yeah, it was sort of, okay. So the first part was, yes, it was definitely a website along with the hats. Well, actually, right when I launched the hats, I think I was trying to build my website, which I've done everything myself. Like I did, um, and it wasn't to like try to flex. It was just kind of like, I want to learn all this stuff because one day if I need to hire somebody, like I need to know if something goes wrong, I can fix it.
That's
And
the best advice you could give, because I'm the same way. I got screwed
yeah.
once and I've built every single website on my own since
Well, and
then.
also these people who like build websites charge way too much money for what it costs. And
Yep.
like, I mean, it's a $30 a month subscription. I started with Squarespace, which
Okay.
I found. So let me back up. Back in like 2009 to 12, 13, I had a men's fashion and lifestyle blog back in like the blogosphere days.
Yeah.
And and I was one of them. And again, touching on the passion, like but within that blog, it was always like apparel, cars, watches, cool hotels, travel. It's just always been who I am as a person.
Yeah.
So, and it was called Screaming Mouth, which was sort of my freelance PR name that I would also do like red carpet events. My friends would hire me to just help at the Young Hollywood Awards or whatever in LA. And
Yeah.
so I thought Screaming Mouth was a cool PR name.
I like it.
And then I also just like translated that over to Blogspot, which was online. And so the blog is still up, screamingmouth.com, shout out. And so on top of that, I found that Squarespace backend was very similar to Blogspot. So I found it quite easy, in fact, to build a website because the user experience on the back end was almost identical. So I was like, oh, well, I've done this before. And
You know what?
then,
You can let me stop you right there. Can you explain what Blogspot is? Because I think a lot of people don't know. I know what it is because I had a blog on it. A
yeah,
million.
oh, funny.
Yeah.
So I don't, maybe you can correct me, but I want to say it was owned by Google, but
It was,
maybe,
I think so, yeah. And it was literally a blogging platform. Anybody could start a blog. It was whatever. Like, okay, this was a million years ago. Mine was Deanna's Dating Adventures or something like that. Blogspot.com.
nice. Awesome. So for me, it was it wasn't necessarily plug and play, but I remembered like I didn't know HTML coding, I didn't know like any of that stuff. Like I still don't.
Yeah.
However, I have my buddy Gabe who was like a coder. And I was like, hey man, if I wanted to do XYZ, like how do I do this? And he gave me like the one piece of code that I like, it was like the like left pointed arrow
Yeah.
A space HREF. And that was how you hyperlinked something
Yep.
with quotation. So like I could do that. And that way I could link to other websites. And my buddy taught me how to do that. And
Yeah.
so then it was like, oh, well, you can almost like drag and drop images. So we'll be speaking of watches, I'm sure. Like I was reposting things from Hodinkee back then. I mean, like I would go to New York just because I've always loved New York City during the winter time because I love wearing a coat and it's hard to do here in San Diego. So I would get my winter sort of Christmas vibe mix holiday cheer by going to New York one weekend every year in December. And there used to be this thing called Pop-Up Flea. So I met Ben from Hodinkee. Anyway, so I would repost that stuff and I would have my blog, obviously. And that again, like sort of translated very seamlessly to Squarespace and how to build that website for when I launched my hat and my t-shirts. Um, And then as the company grew, dare I say, I just knew that I wanted the visuals to look different. And I kept hearing about Shopify. I kept hearing about how the back end was more robust than Squarespace. There was more plugins, there's yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
So during the pandemic, when I started making my own stuff, I switched to Shopify.
Okay.
So that was um, not as seamless as they make it sound.
I was
So
waiting for that.
yeah, so I basically had to rebuild my website, which took a while.
Yeah.
But this is all relating back to your question of like, there's coffee shops on my website. Why is that? And that's all because my brand, being an automotive inspired line of apparel, clearly travel is in conjunction with automotive things. You're driving,
Yeah.
obviously. And between my blog and just my personal life, I would have friends reach out to me all the time about like, where should I stay? Where should I eat? You know, where's a good place to get espresso? And so I was like, rather than just sending them again, like a link to my, like a notes app forward,
Yeah.
you know, where all this stuff was there, I was like, I need to just put this on my website and then I could just send people the link to my website and just say, look, just search under travel and it's there. And they're like, oh my God, amazing. You know, so,
That's such a great idea though, because
oh, thanks.
no, it really is though, because I'm a big fan of, look, I have a million choices to buy
Mhm.
clothing, to buy bags, to buy anything I want.
Yeah.
What makes me think, twice about actually doing business with a company is I always click on their about page or I see their website, I see what's going on. If I can make that connection with that person,
Yeah.
then that absolutely helps. So what you're doing is you're building that connection through that, which I love.
Yeah. And I think, you know, and it's authentic, right? And I think
Exactly.
authenticity is something that's like so paramount in today's world because people
Yep.
can just see through BS. And on top of that, also, it's just like, um, some might actually call me crazy for doing it because like that has a Substack written all over it. Like I should be charging for this information, but I don't, right? Like, and it's just for me, I look at it as added value, right? Like how can I add more value to the customer experience and not just provide clothing? And my podcast is the same way. It's not on Patreon. I don't charge anybody to do it. I don't get paid advertising, you know, which again, maybe I'm a stupid person for not
No, no,
charging
no, no, no. You're
advertising,
not, because
but
authenticity will take you so much further than anything else. I started listening to podcasts on my walk in the morning.
yeah,
I cannot tell you how grating it is to hear minutes and minutes and minutes of ads that have nothing to do with anything. I've been the same way. I started a blog in 2015, Closet Full of Cash, highlighting businesses that I liked, owners
yeah,
that I liked and trusted. I still have it now, although it's kind of dwindling. I've never taken a penny because I don't want to be beholden, but I want to be that voice of trust with people. And that's what I've done. I love that. And I love that you're doing that and you are being authentic. The money will come. It's
yeah, and that's exactly my mentality, right? Like
yeah,
I feel like it's very much, and this is a piece of advice that is like paramount to my world, is that my uncle told me in my 20s, like just before I met with my career counselor, frankly, and he was just like, look, Wesley, like do whatever it is you love doing and the money will come. That is exactly what he told me. And it sounds kind of trite and sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Just kind of like cliche.
yeah,
But
it's true.
it's true. And now granted, again, you may not be worth $100 million as a result, but money will come in some way, shape, or form. And then I think for Standard H, it was again just value add, community building, um, inherent trust. And by the way, if you're getting this information for free, it also literally doesn't cost you, the customer, anything. And if you find that you don't agree with my recommendations, all good. You know what I mean? Like, not, I mean, we don't all have to eat the same thing everywhere we go. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. It's not up for debate. It's like, look, I enjoyed this. I'm sharing it with you. you
Right.
know?
And I think you will
Talk
too. And
about.
if you don't, totally
That's
fine.
okay. Yeah,
You
that's
know?
okay.
Yeah.
We're not fighting about this.
Yeah.
I
Right.
love it. Okay, so let's jump into watches because they're pretty. I love them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wear an Apple, but I want to get a Rolex just so I can have it in my closet. Same thing with a Birkin. I just want it in my closet. But
Right.
you are an avid collector of watches. So I want to get into this about pre-owned because I know there's a lot of luxury resale companies that have looked at that vertical, but
Mhm.
are like kind of like me, like, oh my God, I wouldn't even know where to start, what brands to look at, how to authenticate. So how did your luxury watch collecting kind of start? And then I'm going to ask the most basic questions. What's your favorite? You
Okay.
know, what's the ones that you think are like not worth the hype? Um, go.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that you have to really start with like, what is a luxury watch introduction first? Like, how was I even aware of these things? And I mean, I got to go back to my childhood. My grandfather had a two-tone date just on his wrist my entire childhood.
That's a Rolex. I know
It is, yes.
that.
So it's a stainless steel and yellow gold mix. His had like the champagne sort of yellow goldish dial, which incredibly he gifted me on my wedding day,
Oh,
which was awesome. So I now wear, and he's since passed to like 2 years ago, last year. Oh my God, the time's flying. I don't know what. Yeah. Anyway, he's no longer with us, so rest his soul. But I have his watch, and it makes me think of him every single time I wear it. I mean, I think of him very often. My grandfather was like my hero, which
oh,
is why I was probably paying so much a close attention to everything, like how he wore his clothes, what watch he wore, what kind of shoes did he wear, and that kind of thing. And so, as I sort of worshipped my grandfather growing up, I was like, man, that Rolex would be cool one day. But when I was a teenager, I never really gave it much thought, even though I
yeah.
was always sort of a watch person. And as you do, as you grow up, you start with, I don't know, like I started with a Swiss Army watch as my high school graduation gift that my grandmother gave me on my dad's side, not to be confused with my grandfather on my mom's side. And so then it just the watch journey is all through a lot, like it's almost predicated on price and what you can afford, obviously. So
Kind of like
and
bags.
and then, of course, just being into fashion and having my blog and reading Hodinkee and knowing that as a man, it's like one of the few accessories that sort of we get, you know what I mean? And like, of course, there are the people out there with the chains and the rings and the bracelets. I've never been that person. I've always just been very much like, I wear a watch and that's my jewelry, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so that was sort of kind of my entree into it, and just the blogosphere really of like, oh, well, what's Vacheron Constantin, like, like what's IWC, what's, who are these brands, what do they represent, and who do I like, what do I prefer? And then in 2007, I'm sort of jumping around here
Yeah. That's okay.
chronologically, but in '07, I moved from my home state of North Carolina to Los Angeles. And again, it was to pursue a career in fashion. It was either New York or LA. And I was like, well, I can surf and play golf year round if I go to LA. So that's how I ended up in Los Angeles and started working retail. And it was walking down Rodeo Drive and being like, oh my gosh, what are these things? And I stumbled into IWC. What's IWC? And just fell in love. And like, honestly, IWC happens to be my favorite brand of watch, just because I don't know, there's just something about the aesthetic. It's kind of minimal, but it's also like super functional. They're very well known for their pilot's watches. Once upon a time in another life, I wanted to be a pilot. I had an uncle who was a pilot.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Um, Not the same uncle that gave me the piece of advice. It was a different uncle, but so, and it was just one of those things where I like walked into the store, walked towards the back, and I don't know, I've always had sort of a dressy sort of taste level. Like I've always liked, I would always rather be overdressed than underdressed. And I feel
Yeah.
like I've kind of been that way my whole life. I don't know why necessarily, but and it was the Portofino chronograph, which it looked like it did stuff, but it was elegant and it was really beautiful. It looked dressy, but yet like casual. And I only then found out what these things cost, and they're a lot of money. And so in 2007, I was like, I think at the time that watch was $4,700. And I only then found out that that was their least expensive chronograph, which is kind of weird because I felt like it looked like one of the more expensive ones
Uh-huh.
until you find out the reasons why, the materials used, and if the movement's made in house or not, and like all this stuff. So anyway, I feel like I'm just rambling, but
No,
I
no,
mean,
no. It's so interesting. So did you buy the watch
no,
or
I
if
couldn't afford
then,
it. No, I couldn't afford it.
have
So,
you since then gotten it?
oh, for sure. Yeah, it's one of the ones that will never leave the collection. You know what I mean? It was like my first love. I bought it, but it wasn't my first purchase, which is another story. But it was actually the second purchase of like a big boy watch, as I could call it. But
A big boy watch. Okay, so for someone that's looking to get into luxury watches, okay, so for myself, and nobody roast me for this, I feel that not so much Louis Vuitton, but maybe Burberry is like the lowest
mm,
level of what I consider actual luxury. Like it starts there and then
right.
goes. So what would be like, is Movado luxury? Again, I don't know watches, so, or is Movado more like Coach and Kate Spade?
Good question. Um, in the 90s, it would have definitely been considered like designer, right? Because they
Yeah,
had the museum watch, and to this day is still like a sleeper hit because it's like now it's kind of a if you know you know type of watch,
yeah,
but like, so I'm quite close, so I may be a little biased, but there's a brand called Oris, and it is a privately owned business out of Switzerland. It's all Swiss movements, everything. It's an amazing brand. And they range from like, and again, are you defining luxury based on price or quality of material, design? Like that's another interesting conversation, right? Is like
yeah.
if you're spending over $1,000 on a watch, I think most people might consider that a luxury item, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think
So
that's fair to say. Yeah,
yeah, and I think Oris does an incredible job at like bridging that gap, right? In the same way that like contemporary clothing, like Coach, honestly, it's like,
yeah,
is it luxury? Not really, but it certainly bridges the gap from like lesser expensive apparel and kind of gets you over the hump of like, oh no, that handbag's actually like a couple $100s. It's not $50, right? So whereas Oris is even more luxury than not, I would say. They're kind of a
okay.
$1,200 to $4,500 price range. So there's a lot within their offering and assortment at a variance of prices, which is a really great place to start, in my opinion. Another foray into the watch world, not necessarily luxury per se, but Seiko. I mean, you'll hear it time and again. If you're looking for a mechanical watch that like gives you the feeling that functions the same way these other brands do, and you can get those for a few $100s up to a couple $1,000s depending.
Yeah,
um, and those are all things that kind of get you into the game and understanding what a mechanical movement even is, and whether it's an automatic movement versus a manual wind and things like that. So in other words, not running on quartz, which is a battery, right? So
yeah,
uh, there's just so many different avenues into the, I guess, hobby, if you will. Um, and then again, it's kind of, you should always buy what you like. You'll hear that a lot in among watch collectors, because if you're buying just for the appreciation of price, trends come and go. I mean, let's speak of Movado, right? Like
yeah,
those were like cool in 96,
yeah,
but then you kind of never heard about them, and you could probably find them for like pennies on the dollar based on what you may have paid in the 90s. But then there's been sort of resurgence of Movado even over the last few years of, maybe not to the peak, but certainly gained back some popularity that they once had.
yeah. We have a question. What is the most counterfeited watch? So it would be like probably brand and maybe style.
Gotta be a Rolex, I would imagine. Yeah, I mean, those are knocked off constantly. And honestly, like the tricky thing too is like the knockoffs are getting so good.
Same
Like,
with bags. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So and if you're buying online, it's even trickier because like you can't feel the leather of that fake bag, you know? Like
Yeah.
sometimes the visual is identical, but like it's the material used that's the fake part, right?
The
Whereas with
smell.
watches, like you can usually spot the differences, but now they're getting so good even on down to the movements. Like if you have like a see-through case back,
Yeah.
some of these are getting really, really, really good.
So how do you authenticate? Like if you're buying something, because I've always like I've worked with pawnbrokers forever and they're, a lot of their business is luxury watches. Um, I've always, been concerned, like with the bag, you look at the outside, the inside, the stamping, the hardware, the engraving, and you can basically authenticate it that way. But with a watch, it has to do with everything inside of it. So I've
Yeah.
heard the term like Frankensteining, with
Yeah.
with real parts and then aftermarket parts. And, because I know people are going to be watching this going, okay, I want to start selling watches. How do I make sure I'm okay? How do I authenticate it? Are there companies, that authenticate watches?
Yeah, and I mean there are some, I think if you Google it, you can find some people that can authenticate, but like a great way of knowing, and not to say that it might be too late, but sending your watch into service, like
Yeah.
through the brand, they will certainly reject it if it's not theirs. You know what I mean? So if it goes through a service, which if you're buying a pre-owned watch, you may want to do that anyway, right?
Can
Because you
you do
want to
that?
make sure.
Will the brands accept a pre-owned watch to service?
Absolutely. I mean, if it's an authentic watch, absolutely. That's how they make some of their money is servicing, like it's like a mechanic shop. If you take your car into Audi or Porsche, like
Yeah.
their service center is a lot to do with why that company's profitable, right?
See, for luxury bags, a lot of companies won't do that. You have to have the original
Interesting.
receipt. You have to be the original buyer. But knowing that
Oh,
you can,
really?
oh yeah, it's, I don't know why they do that because they could be making so much money doing it. But knowing that you can do that with watches, that's because I know people actually try to do that with Hermes. They'll send a bag in, and if it goes to the spa, then they're good to go. If not, then they know it's probably not
Right.
counterfeit.
It's
I don't know
fishy.
that they
Yeah.
actually say, yeah, but that's good
So,
to know.
so when I was at Gucci, I don't think we ever required a receipt to send it in for repair.
How many years ago was that?
Yeah, 2015, 2013.
Okay, so I say this all the time. The luxury resale industry is unlike any other industry. It's
Yeah.
the same does not apply, and it changes literally quarter by quarter by quarter by year.
Mm.
Like Gucci may be one, but I've heard of people getting denied. I know
Interesting.
Chanel, you have to have all the paperwork that you bought it, the receipt. They launched a moi a service that like when you buy a bag, you're registered, and if anything happens, you can send it back in to get repaired.
Yeah.
Only for 5 years. So the secondary market, people burnt Louis Vuitton out doing this, and now they're getting very strict. Like you have to have the receipt. So
Interesting.
yeah,
Interesting. Yeah. Well, yeah. So, I mean, I don't really know. I mean, I think I'm pretty sure if you go into like a Rolex, authorized dealer and say, I would like to get this serviced, I don't think they do. I don't know
I'm
because I always send it in to the authorized dealer that I bought it from, so they know it's mine, right? So like,
yeah.
I, I don't know. It's interesting.
Well, that's something we'll have to find out. Okay, we have a couple of questions. What watch would you recommend starting out
I mean, it's tricky because what's your budget? It's
with?
like,
Yeah,
what's your starter home gonna be, right? Like, I don't know how much money you got, like and I don't want to cop out, but it is that, like how
it
much do
is.
you
Yeah.
have to spend because the sky is literally the limit. And I
Okay,
would
what's a
say
good price point for a starter Rolex? Say like just no
three to
diamond.
five
Like,
thousand. Like you could probably find some cool stuff for 3 grand, 5 grand. It also depends on like because are you really looking for a vintage watch? Are you looking for a modern watch that's pre-owned? Because there's a fundamental difference, even just like aesthetically. Like a lot of the watches from the 1960s were 34 millimeters. And if you're looking for a 40 millimeter watch from 1960, good luck, unless
Yeah.
you're buying a Submariner. And if you're buying a Submariner, which I believe was still even 38 millimeters back then, that watch it could be $100,000 depending on what you're looking at. So it's like, that's not a starter watch. But if you
No.
want a vintage watch, like if you get like a Oyster no date that's like from the precision line or one of the ones that was considered oversized, you might find something for six, seven, $8,000 that's 36 millimeters and from 1966, or something like that. But if you're looking for a modern watch that's pre-owned, a lot of those prices are still hovering around retail, if not over, if it's over a watch that's currently still in the catalog, even though it's
Okay,
pre.
two questions. Can I like go into Rolex and buy a watch? Because I keep reading online that all the watches are just for display.
99 times out of 100, probably no. I feel like the market right now is starting to soften. So they may have like a two-tone date. Honestly, one of their least desirable, which I hate even saying that because for somebody out there, it's extremely desirable, right? Like
Yeah.
we're back to the restaurant conversation of what I order and what you order may be different, right? So like what I find to be least desirable and what Rolex determines as least desirable are probably two different things due to the fact that they can prove it's least desirable because they're not selling, right?
Yeah.
So, and they may offer you that watch, which newsflash, you may not like it. So it's kind of like least desirable for
So
a
how do you
reason.
buy a watch?
Really good question. It's about a lot of things. It's like Hermes. Sometimes you kind of
The Birkin?
got the thing you don't want in order to get the thing you want.
Okay.
I almost consider it sort of like extortion in a way, legal
100%.
extortion,
Yeah.
because I mean, honestly, AP is notorious about this. Audemars Piguet. It's like if you want a Royal Oak, good luck as your first time. Unless you're a celebrity, you're not getting it. And the way they get it is you got to buy a code 1159. Well, those start at $24,000. So basically, you're asking me to spend 24,000 extra in that, and I'm still not even guaranteed a Royal Oak as a result. So it's nerve-wracking, it's frustrating, but you got to build the relationships. And for someone like a Rolex, if you're going to go in there and say, I want a date just, okay, I mean, that's one of their least expensive models. It's sort of like not a starter Rolex, but like, so I have an OP no date, which is sort of a starter Rolex. It was my wedding watch, in fact. Um, and I think managing expectations is another one. You can't walk into Rolex saying, "Oh, I want a Daytona." That is like for so many people such a grail piece that you're
Oh,
just
yeah.
like, forget it, right?
Well, we
Like,
talked about this. That was the one that was on Antiques Roadshow, right?
yes, exactly. I mean, of course, that one was older, but like,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where you just have to go in there. You kind of got to schmooze a bit if it's your first visit. Come in and tell them why. They're going to want to know, why do you want this watch? Are you celebrating something? Are you getting married? Or did you just retire? All these things, which is so crazy that how they have to qualify in order to like sell you something. It's kind of like, if you want a t-shirt from StandardH, you can go in and buy it. You know what I mean? Like, and why it's different, I can't explain.
It's luxury. It's
It's
the whole,
luxury, it's supply and demand, even though
yeah.
Rolex makes 1 million watches a year,
Yeah.
literally. You're just kind of like, well, who are the 1 million people buying watches then? Um,
Not us. Well, okay, so I have found like when I do something big, I will
mhm.
buy myself something. And it started with a Cartier Love Band.
Great.
First thing I do, and I learned this a long time ago, is I'm celebrating. I'm buying myself something to celebrate this XYZ.
Totally.
Oh my God, do you want champagne? Do you want this? And look, I'm only spending like $1,500, but treat me like a queen, because you know what? When I go to buy that Rolex, I'm not doing it there. I'm going to the pre-owned market. It's
Yeah.
only like you have to know how to play the game. Like
Right.
I would love a Birkin. Would I go to Hermes and ask for a Birkin? No.
Well, you can they will laugh at your face, right?
Well,
Like,
I wouldn't do it even if and this is just me personally. I don't work that way. You
right.
know, I would go to the pre-owned market because I'm going to save money and I'm going to get exactly what I want.
Yeah.
But I don't, and I know that there's people that will do the spends. They'll buy their $24,000 watch. They'll
Sure.
continue to buy because they want that experience of buying it from the brand. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not really I'm not a fan of that. Okay, one more question, and then I'm gonna ask you a few couple questions, and then I'm gonna let you go.
All good.
What's the most expensive watch you have in your collection?
Oh gosh. Do
And
we
you
really
don't feel like you
talk
have to
about this?
answer that
Yeah.
because, yeah. Well, somebody asked it, so I'm obliged to or obligated to ask
I
you.
mean, I'd rather, yeah, I
Don't
mean,
say it. Don't say it.
it's really not about the money, right? Like you
No.
get what you want based on if you can afford it. And, you know, I don't, yeah, I don't, let's not be motivated by those things. Like this is the most
No.
expensive thing. Like to me, I don't buy watches to show off. In fact, a lot of my watches are some of the least desirable, like the OP No Date. Granted, it's a Rolex. It's very desirable because it's a Rolex, but
Yeah.
it's not a Daytona. You know, it's not a meteorite dial
It's like an
at
Evelyn or an Res Evelyn.
$60,000.
Yeah,
Right. Like,
exactly.
so just, you know, I buy the watches that I can afford to buy,
Yeah.
and I buy the ones that I love the most. And if I can't afford it, I'll try to save up longer. Like there are grail pieces of mine that like I really want in the future.
Okay, let's answer that one. What's the one watch that you really like? I'm gonna have this before I die. Like, what's the one that you just like look at the pictures of and go,
Oh God, I mean, there's so many, first of all. And second of all, and second of all, because it is only a watch, like there are times where I look at these things in full disclosure. I'm like, I can't like just possibly spend that amount of money on a watch.
yeah,
Like,
you can't justify it. Yeah.
you know, I mean, I'm not John Mayer making whatever $28 million a year, you know, like or $40 million a year, or whatever he makes. If you're making $40 million a year, you can afford a $250,000 watch. I'm sorry, like you just can't.
That's a house. Yeah, that's I
Yeah.
can I'm cheap when it comes to that kind of stuff. That's why I scour the secondhand market. But for
Well,
what?
if it and but the problem, not the problem, one of the problems with scouring the secondhand market in watches is depending on the watch, you might be paying more than retail. So
Exactly.
it's
That's what I was
like
gonna say.
it's $250,000 on the gray market. It's a $50,000 watch if you can get it from an AD, but you can't, right? So it's like,
Ugh.
what are you gonna do? So yeah, it's really not about like how much something costs to
Yeah.
me. It's
Mhm.
really about, are you wearing a watch that you can afford? Are you wearing a watch or buying a watch rather that you love the look of? I'm
Yeah.
not buying for somebody else. I'm buying for me. Uh, because people know I like watches, friends of mine will be like, "Oh, what are you wearing today?" You know, that kind of thing. And more oftentimes than not, it's an IWC. So it's
Okay, so
like,
I was gonna ask you what watch is that one?
so this is the IWC. It's called the Tribute to 3705. It's a all ceratanium watch, which is a basically a titanium. It's a what's not prototypical. It is a what is it when you have not a patent, but what is the word I'm looking for? Anyway, IWC is the only one who makes this material, basically. It's
Okay.
good God, I'm drawing a blank.
Inventor?
Sorry.
Inventor?
Well, yeah, so basically it's titanium and they bake it to the hardness of ceramic.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
proprietary, that's the
Oh,
word.
proprietary. Okay.
So it's a material. So IWC was, I believe, the first company ever to make a watch out of ceramic. And so taking that a step further, they found a way to basically, you have the benefits of the weight of titanium, which is lighter than steel, but has the hardness of ceramic. So it's this and it starts out big and they bake it and it just gets more and more dense,
Oh,
which gives it
wow.
its hardness and its toughness. Um, so it's a really cool watch. It's called the Tribute to 3705 because they had a watch in the 90s from 94 to 98 called the 3705. The proportions were a little different, but overall the design aesthetic is the same. And I love black. Um, this watch to me is IWC. Like, this is what they do. A pilot's chronograph is like one of the hallmarks of their collection. And I absolutely love this watch. This is another one that, like, I genuinely don't think I will ever get rid of. It's a limited edition piece of 1,000 pieces worldwide. So it's really special in that sense. I also just noticed I did not set the date because it's not the first, it's the second. So obviously it's not a perpetual calendar. But anyway, it's a beautiful watch. It's a great watch. It's 41 millimeters. It's not too big. It's not too small. It's kind of the perfect sweet spot. I took it off of its OEM strap and put it on this NATO looking strap, which I actually make in collaboration with a friend of mine, Nick at Strap Habit. So this is
Oh,
a
interesting.
sort of a limited release strap that I've done with as a collaboration that just got relaunched yesterday. In fact, I started this side Instagram called Taupe Strap Club because I think taupe straps go with everything.
They do. Thank
Yeah,
you.
so I started releasing straps in taupe as a result.
And it's called Taupe Strap Club.
Yeah, so if you love taupe, and you like watches, that's the Instagram for you. Yeah, so it's kind of a new sort of side, kind of tongue in cheek. The only thing you need to be in the club is to have a taupe strap. You know what I
That's
mean?
it. There you
And
go.
that's what's cool about watches is that I can put this on a black strap, I can put this on a military green strap, I could put it on a taupe strap. And not only are the straps less expensive than the watch itself, of course, it totally transforms the way the watch appears on your wrist and goes with your different outfits and things of that nature. So it's like, it's a way to enjoy even just one watch in a multitude of ways and really give you a feeling like you may have multiple watches when really it's only the same watch. And that's one of the fun things is, it's like, I don't know, wearing a certain pair of jeans with a blazer versus a t-shirt, or you know what I mean, dress up, dress down, or there's
Yeah.
just ways to style these things. And
I
it's,
love it. I love
yeah,
it. And because men don't have bags,
right,
you guys
right.
have watches, but to be able
Yeah,
to interchange the straps, I mean, I've done that my whole life with watches when I used to
sure.
wear like an actual watch. So I'll have
And
to
this
follow.
$24 strap is far cheaper than buying a handbag.
Exactly. Okay,
Yeah.
we're going to wind up. What is one piece of advice you would give to anyone wanting to get in to collecting, reselling luxury watches?
Yeah, I think research, and condition, condition, condition. So really look at what you're buying, know the product, really do your deep dive and your due diligence on what it is, what makes this watch different than another. I mean, if you're going down the rabbit hole of Rolex, I mean, there's 5 different variations. They call them marks: Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, kind of like a Volkswagen GTI, Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3. There's different iterations and sort of body styles, if you will, of cars. It's the same in watches where, you're looking at a Submariner. The ones that had 2 lines at 6 o'clock are known as the 5513. Well, there's 5 different dial variations of that watch over the years.
Oh my
And,
gosh.
the indices and the plots are usually a telltale sign of as to what mark it is. Or like if Submariner's written over the depth rating versus under the depth rating. Like there's all these like I mean, there's actually I think the website is 5513 in numbers, and then it's mattdial.com. I think it's 5513 mattdial. Google it. It's a whole website dedicated only to these watches that I just referred to.
Oh, wow.
So, and I mean, that's just that era of Submariner. Like, Submariner goes back to 1954. It goes to today. And there's not hundreds, but there's tens of variations of the Submariner. Maybe 100. I mean, I don't know, but
That's correct. I always tell people when they want to get into this, they get into handbags. I'm like, pick one brand
yeah,
and learn absolutely everything that you can about it because it's, I tell people it starts with passion. You have to
sure.
be excited about learning.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think watches is a whole other, I mean, it is a whole other category, but just what you said right there, like, I'm like, oh my God,
It's
that's so,
crazy. Yeah, I mean, it can be debilitating. I mean, it's like, I mean, honestly, like years I'm into this, years, like
yeah,
more than a decade. And I still feel like I know very little. I mean, I have friends who are dealers who are like, just like board, like mad scientist level, like knowledge on this stuff. And it's crazy. I mean, you can go as deep as you want,
yeah.
basically. It's like this, the prices or the sky's the limit. It's like the deep dive goes as deep as you want. Like it gets nitty gritty.
That's crazy. Well, I can't even think about it because my head's so full of bags right now. But it's very interesting. I cannot thank you enough for joining
Sure.
me today. Like this was very inspiring, and I love the fact that you're one of the you're one of the good ones out there. Let me put it that way. You're
Well,
like
thank
very
you.
authentic, very trustful. You're following your heart and your passion, and I love to see people I don't want to say follow their dreams, but you kind of are, but you're having success with it. So it's a really good example for people to do what they love. Like you said, do what you love and the money will come.
Yeah,
But God, thank you so much. And then we'll add, because we're going to post this on YouTube, links
sure.
to the website, the StandardH website, which, if I could just throw any advice, women's t-shirts.
Yeah, yes.
I
I've
know
heard it
I know
before.
you're
It's
men,
just
but
it's a whole other realm, I'm basically
yeah.
starting another line, which just makes it twice as expensive,
Yeah. Well,
from
I'm
an
just saying if
investment standpoint.
yeah, if you ever want to, let me know and
Yeah,
I'll buy a ton. But
got it.
just thank you so much, Wesley. I really, really
No,
appreciate
thank you. No, this was super
it.
fun. I really enjoyed it. We should do it again.
Oh, we
Anytime.
will.
Yeah, it'd be
Okay,
great.
thank you. You have a
Thank
great day.
you. You too.
All right, bye.
Thank you.